So I'm going to call the December 13th, 2024 meeting of the Circulation ILL Advisory Group to order at 9:34 a.m. I want to do a quick roll. Since this is our first meeting, I'm hoping that as I go through roll, you don't mind giving your name, what library you're from, and your position, just as a brief introduction. So I will start. My name is Mieko. I'm the Member Services Librarian for Public Services at CCS. Thank you all for participating this year. I'm going to go through the roll. I will start with Danny.
Hello, everybody. My name is Danny Burdett. I'm the head of circulation and ILL at the Glencoe Public Library.
Sean.
Hi guys, I'm Sean. I'm from the Morton Grove Public Library. I'm the Access Services Assistant Manager. Yeah.
Janine.
I'm Janine. I am the head of circulation at the Mount Prospect Public Library.
And Matthew.
My name is Matthew Hoffman. I'm the circulation manager at the Wilmette Public Library.
And joining us today is the newest CCS staff member, Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly Mansfield. I'm I'm sorry. What is my title, Mieko? This is my first week. I'm so sorry.
I know, right? No, it's like I feel like everyone is a combination of some kind of like member services, something or other. Specialists?
Associate?
Oh,
Sure.
associate?
Yes. So this is my first week, and thanks for having me.
We're throwing her right into everything, basically. Not with us today is Cheryl. She said she was going to be unable to attend, and Athena and Chris. Hopefully they'll be able to pop in sometime during this meeting. So the first thing on our agenda is the approval of minutes from our last meeting, which was June 2024. So I will rely on our returning members. Do you have any corrections to the minutes?
No, I have no corrections.
I see Danny shaking his head. So hearing none, the minutes will be approved as submitted. So make sure I post that online. We have no old business. We'll move right into our new business. So ahead of a meeting, I will share out an agenda and a packet with the group. The packet will include background information and example discussion questions for each topic. Our topics are generally going to be either presentation, action topics, or discussions. With an action topic, our goal is to agree on a recommendation for how to move forward. So anything that's labeled as an action, we will intend to vote on today. The packet includes a motion, and the motion can either pass or fail depending on how the group votes. We don't have any guests with us today from member libraries. If we have guests, we absolutely welcome them to participate in discussions, but voting is limited to the advisory group members. So the first thing I'd like to do, this is our first meeting of this fiscal year. I always like to give a brief overview of the role and responsibilities of the advisory group. So I am going to share my screen and give just a very quick, maybe there we go, overview of the Circulation ILL Advisory Group. So your role as advisory group members is to consult with us on potential system configuration, workflows, policies, that sort of thing. You will help with research and testing and recommend policy changes and best practices to the associated technical groups. For this group, that will either be the circulation technical group or the ILL technical group. So as advisory group members, you are expected to use your expertise and knowledge to represent the CCS community. Participate in up to 4 advisory group meetings per year. If we don't have anything to discuss, we will cancel a meeting. So we canceled our September meeting. We have a hefty agenda for our December meeting. You are also expected to come to 4 associated technical group meetings per year. And which group may depend on your role at the library. So if you are primarily primarily work in circulation, you will attend the circulation technical group. If you're primarily ILL, you will attend the ILL technical group. You are absolutely welcome to attend all. And then we will also engage in like email conversations in between meetings. So sometimes I may reach out and just ask for the group's feedback through email on the odd months we don't have a meeting. And then finally, you'll work with CCS staff to present findings and recommendations if needed at a technical group meeting. So as I mentioned, one of the main roles of the group is to give recommendations on our shared workflows or policy changes. But then it's like, what happens to those recommendations? So we have a matrix here. We have a matrix here that guides where recommendations go based on the impact of those changes. So if there is no change to workflow or no financial or human resources impact, CCS can take that recommendation and implement it. So an example of some kind of recommendation in this area is the recommendation to increase patron notice history display in LEAP from 3 months to 6 months. So it was no impact on staff workflows. There was no financial or staffing impact. So we were able to implement that ourselves. If there is a workflow impact, but still no financial or human resources impact, the recommendation will go to the associated technical group for approval. And this will be the majority of our recommendations. So a couple examples for this area is like if we want to revise a segment of the circulation manual, or we're giving recommendations for a damaged item workflow. That will come to either the Circ Tech or ILL Tech, and the group will vote to approve and accept that workflow or request revisions. Finally, if the recommendation includes like a financial impact or human resources impact, like the addition of a system service-wide or a formal policy change to codify it to the governing board policies, that recommendation will first be taken to the technical group for review. If it passes there, it will then be taken to the governing board for final approval. These kind of recommendations don't come up too often. Some like hypothetical examples here is if we say, all libraries must have a full-time phone attendant on staff, or all libraries in CCS are formally fine-free. Those are the types of decisions that go all the way up to governing board. So your appointments on the committee will last to the end of the fiscal year. So we will have 2 additional meetings. We will plan to have 2 additional meetings in addition to the December one. We've got the March 2025 meeting, and then the final meeting of the year will be on June 13th. These meetings will all be on Zoom. They will all start at 9:30. We'll estimate, I would say, block out time to go to at least 11:30. Our meetings tend not to go that long, though. Are there any questions about the role of the advisory group? Hearing none, I'm just going to stop sharing real quick. Hearing none, we will move on to our next new business, which is actually about our March 14th meeting. The meeting was originally meant to be scheduled for March 14th, and I think that was the date we sent to everyone when you were added to the advisory group. However, this date overlaps with the Innovative Users Group conference, which I will be attending. So I wanted to check with the group to see if you'd be able to meet the previous Friday, so Friday, March 7th. Would that work for everyone?
Should be
That
good.
works for me.
Okay, great. This is an action item, so we will do our formal motion. May I please have a motion to reschedule the meeting to March 7th?
So moved.
Danny moves. May I have a second?
I second.
Matthew seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Awesome. Well, next meet on March 7th, I'll update the calendars online. And for our next new business, this is also an action topic. So I'm hoping we will have a recommendation to take to the Circ Tech Group in January. For the rest of our new business items, I've kind of summarized the information in the packet on some slides. So we'll just go through those together and then we will discuss. So once again, share my screen. So our first action item is going to discuss the use of the patron record alt email field. So for those who work with patron registration, the alt email, it's a field in the patron registration work form, and it is used as a secondary email specifically for sending checkout and fine receipts, emailed receipts. To give you an idea of how many patrons currently use this feature, as of November 26, we had 2.12% of patrons in the database that use alt email address field. So that comes out to roughly 12,000 users. So previously, since we've migrated in 2018, the alt email was only used with those receipts, those checkout receipts and those fine receipts. There is a Polaris setting available that would enable us to send notices to alt emails. So if we enable this, the patron would receive the email notices at both that primary email and that alt email address. And this includes all notices. So everything from the reminder notices to overdues, bills, holds, and then any optional notices that your library uses. If your library uses the patron registration expiration reminder or a free collections fine notice. So what we want to talk about today is if we want to recommend enabling this setting, and if so, what that kind of implementation would look like. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now so we can kind of discuss. So the first things I always like throwing out there with a discussion is considering, is this functionality provide value to patrons, or would it potentially negatively affect the patron experience?
Well, Mieko, the only concern that I had was, would it be too redundant? You know, patrons, you know, get all these notices from us to get them at both emails. I guess the redundancy of it would be a concern. You know.
Yeah, I will say as a new CCS library, our patrons are still adjusting to just how many things now come to their email because before it was very limited, and now all of their overdue and their billing and everything. So I don't know that for our patrons right now, it would feel like a value add to get all of these notices to another email address in addition to their primary one.
I think I would probably want to add was that if there's only 2%, 2.12% of patrons that have the alternate email address, how much are we really impacting the patrons that actually have it? And I know when I worked at Lincolnwood and then here at Morgan Grove, we often don't use the alternate email address, or people don't provide that on our applications. But with your question of would it add, is it like I don't think it's a negative thing. The only thing, like I think it was Michael was saying, it just might be redundant, but other than that, it could be a helpful reminder for people, but I'm not sure if it would be just repetitive, like, oh, it's another email.
Yeah, we don't use it that I'm aware. I mean, we might have patrons who have that field populated, but as a rule, we don't use it. It seems kind of too fragmented to me in terms of communicating with patrons and keeping that clear. But Mieko, do we lose anything by further enabling it? Seems like a local decision. Is that the case?
So that would be another question. Majority of our notice settings are set system-wide so that the patron can have a consistent experience wherever they go. With enabling a setting like this, I think ultimately it's up to the group. I think my preference would be to have, again, consistent settings system-wide so that we avoid a situation where a patron is like, checked out from Morton Grove, who enables it. So they're used to seeing notices there. They go to Wilmette, who may not, and they're like, hey, Wilmette, I didn't get my notices. Why not?
And I wasn't clear of Mieko. I'm in terms of local decision, I didn't mean turning it on or off. It's more like
gotcha.
how we utilize it.
Sorry, Danny. I
Yeah.
get
But that was me, I
that.
think.
Yes. No. But that is true. Yeah. Some libraries may want to collect it. Some other libraries may say, not necessary.
So then is it in terms of enabling it to have more things go to the alt email? Yeah, I guess then is it a nuisance for anybody? Is it a nuisance for CCS to do that? I sort of don't care.
I think for consistency's sake, I mean, yeah, it'd be problematic if one library was doing it, another one wasn't. Patrons might be wondering where their notices are. So I think maybe for consistency's sake to enable it.
Has other libraries used that field in their applications? Do you like see patrons filling out an alternate email in general in your other libraries?
I mean, our patrons didn't have an option until we joined in October to even add a second email address field. So I would imagine the vast majority of ours don't have a second email at all right now.
It's the same here at Wilmette, Janine. We just have really the one option for patrons for the email. And the majority just have the one.
And for the sake of consistency, Mieko, is it the case that and we have patrons obviously who roam between CCS libraries, if we have a Des Plaines patron who utilizes both, wherever they go, they're still going to get notices to both for consistency, right?
That would be correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, if we didn't utilize it, at a particular library for our patrons, it can still be consistent all over, I think.
So it sounds like a lot of the libraries represented here your patrons don't really have an alternate email address in the field. Playing devil's advocate here, if this setting was enabled so that notices go out in both primary and alt email, your patrons without an alt email will still just get the notice to the one location. I mean, would that have, I'm not totally sure how I'm trying to phrase my question here. You know, would that change your workflows at all, having that option?
No, well, not.
No,
I guess one of the things I'm thinking too is even though it doesn't feel like a huge value add to me to offer that, if a patron had an alt email and we turned this functionality on and they started getting it everywhere, if they didn't like that, they could just get rid of the alt email and then they don't have to worry about it. So I don't feel like it's a strong value add necessarily for our patrons, but I also don't feel like it would really negatively impact anyone either. It's an easy fix if they were upset by it.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was wondering. Is it a nuisance to have it enabled? And if we're not using it anyway at some libraries, I don't know, see why it would be a problem.
So for those, and kind of thinking about those 2% of patrons who do have alt email addresses in the records already. Those users added alt emails with the expectation that they would get their checkout receipts to that field. So thinking about like if we recommend enabling this and the tech group approves, we have 2% of patrons that kind of like their anticipated behavior of what they're going to get, or like the expectations for what they're going to get at that alternate email is now going to change. So I guess, do you think that implementing that change would be problematic for those patrons? How would you maybe kind of mitigate that change with them?
you mean just getting the message out to them, communicating this change?
Mhm. Or do you think that it's not as big of a deal that we could potentially make it out to be?
No, I don't know. I don't think it's a big enough deal. I mean, as was pointed out, I mean, this could be an easy fix if it did become a problem for a patron.
Is there a particular library or two where they do this more than most of us?
That's a good question. I have not looked at the statistics broken down by library.
But it may just be 2% spread across
Mhm.
CCS as well, yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal either way. But if there's a library or two that are really adamant about having it, I don't think it's a hassle for the rest of us for it just to be there.
Mhm.
I also think if we made the change, it feels like it would be easy enough to just send even just an email notification to the alt email addresses on file for patrons at your library to say, this change is coming as of X date. You'll receive all of these. If you don't want this, remove the alt email, reach out to us. What I mean, that feels like a fairly easy thing to do in advance of the change. so that before they start getting inundated with emails, they're not expecting, they have an option to turn it off.
And CCS could easily provide that list for the library.
Miko, I know I'm very new to this, but I was thinking about the conversation we were having about if something bounced, then potentially you're going to end up in that situation with the quote unquote printed notice. So if there are libraries that are collecting the alt email, then they're going to make sure that they don't bounce, hopefully. But it sounds like if people aren't, I agree, I think it was Danny that said it, if people aren't collecting that alt email, it's really not going to affect your patrons. And the patron can turn it off themselves. So I would more err on the side of making sure that alt email is there to catch those bounces, would be my take on it.
It's a good point. So Harvey, I get the sense that this group is pretty neutral about the setting based on your own library's usage of alt email. Kind of thinking about other libraries, how other libraries might potentially use the alt email address. Would you recommend enabling this to kind of give the other libraries the opportunity?
I think so. I mean, if there is a library that is regularly collecting this or want things going to both emails, I think it's fine to offer them an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I have no issue with giving the libraries that opportunity.
So how would this group feel about making the motion to recommend? So we take this to the tech group for wider discussion. Would you feel comfortable with that?
You need an official motion from one of us.
Yes. Would anyone
I
like?
motion to recommend enabling alt email use with email notices.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Janny. All in favor?
I
I,
And looks like all in favor, so I'll call any opposed. So we will take this to the January tech group for discussion. I will check on the statistics broken down by library as well. So when you see like who this might be impacting the most if we turn it on. And ahead of the meeting, CCS will kind of sketch out a potential game plan if the recommendation changes. So that way we can provide libraries with the resources. They do want to touch base with patrons before anything is activated. Cool. Anything else on that topic before we move on? I'm going to share my screen once again. So this next topic is, I put it on there as a discussion, only because this is a brand new feature with our newest version of Polaris that we literally just upgraded our training database to on Wednesday. So I've not had a chance to play around with it yet. So it is a new feature that allows us to suppress the soft block alerts. When you are checking out to a patron in Leap or placing a hold, and I wanted to throw that out there because I know in the packet I focused mostly on checking out, but these also pop up when you're placing a hold. Polaris will display a pop-up alert if the patron has blocks. This includes both those hard blocks, so conditions that stop circulation, and soft blocks, which are just alerts. So they don't prevent the patron from checking out. They just alert staff to things like the patron has holds ready for pickup or the patron owes minor fees. So like I said, there's a new feature in Polaris version 7.7 that allows us to suppress the soft block alerts. When enabled, staff will not see one or more of the following soft blocks. So the common ones that staff run into all the time are the ones for like the money owes, money owed, so they owe money, just not enough to be blocked, or the held item, patron has an item or items on hold. Some less common ones are a pop-up for unread messages. There is a feature in Leap that allows staff to post a message to the patron's account page on the pack. This is a feature that very rarely is used by libraries. Another rarely used one is accrued money owed. So the patron has estimated money owed on overdue items they have not yet returned, but not yet enough to be blocked. Almost all of our libraries are fine free, so this does not apply to majority of our libraries. So this new setting, it can be enabled system-wide. It can also be enabled branch by branch. And in addition to that, we can kind of pick and choose which soft blocks that we suppress. So a library can say, I don't care about seeing that money owed pop up, but I still want to see if the patron has holds, or vice versa. So since we haven't seen this feature in play, I did not make it an action item, but I wanted to introduce the topic to everyone, give you some time to play around with it in our training database, and then kind of give everyone time to kind of figure out like if this is something we want to share system-wide. Is it something we want to then need a recommendation for the January CERC technical group meeting? So, there we go. So I will say, I did hear from Cheryl on this one. She sent some thoughts in email. And she says that her staff do find it helpful to remind users about things like holds or just let them know they have fees. It sounds like she doesn't want patrons to feel that the staff did not notify them of a condition. So her preference is to allow the branches to like choose individually. So I know no one has had a chance to see it, but just kind of knowing about the soft blocks, I'm interested to see, like, do your staff find those soft block alerts helpful? Do your staff tend to just bypass them?
Well, Miyako, my first impression was this is something I think should be done by library branch, because at least here at Wilmette, you know, I always try and get my staff to look at those screens, and especially with the holds, having that reminder pop up. Even for fees, to have that come up is always helpful. So, I mean, we're so used to having that screen that just to have that added reminder to help staff. Because even in my own case, you know, if a patron has a hold, it's easier to see that with that reminder. So at least here at Wilmette, I would vote to have that more branch by branch as opposed to suppressing it system-wide.
I agree. I think we would, especially the hold reminders, we would opt to keep on, because even though 9 times out of 10 that patron is at the desk with those holds that you're getting reminded about, that 1 out of 10 that isn't and you don't remind is going to be so mad when they get home and they see that they had a hold and no one told them about it. So I think leaving it up to a branch decision on what they want to turn on and leave off is fine. And I think we would opt to keep them on probably.
Oh, Danny, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, we're much the same. And we do find it useful, and in training and staff, it's always look at the screen, look at the screen, look at the screen. So yeah, we would certainly want to keep those.
Yeah, also in Morning Grove, that hold pop-up that pops up, I think even for staff that aren't here as often in the week, that's a great reminder for them. Hey, let me check the shelf to see if our interlibrary loans or the other holds are available. I think it's a super great reminder.
So I am very, very, very comfortable leaving this up to individual branches on if they want to suppress it or not. And that sounds like what this group also is kind of, the group is in agreement with that. Is that a correct assessment? See nods. So in that case, I am very comfortable in saying that instead of needing some kind of formal action with this, we will just take it to the Circ Tech group and say, this is a new option for you. Let us know if you would like to enable or not, and give each location kind of that decision. Okay. Cool. Any other comments about the soft block suppression before we move on to our next discussion? I'll go back to my slides. So our next two agenda topics are just discussion at this point. I wanted to use this opportunity to kind of introduce the topics to the group, get your general feel, know what questions you have that we need to address, with the intent then to revisit at our March meeting for more of a discussion around like how we want to move forward with these fields. So the next two discussion topics, I want to look at the patron record gender field and title field. So starting with the gender field. So I did include part of the ALA library privacy guidelines just to give some kind of context about why we should be thinking of how we're using these fields. So the ALA library privacy guidelines just kind of warn against collecting data that can potentially put users at risk if the data is breached or improperly used. We should limit the amount only to the information required to provide a service or meet a specific operational need. So some background on the gender field in Polaris. By default, the Polaris patron registration work form includes a gender field, and this is a fixed value field where staff select from a dropdown. The default selections, which are the ones that CCS libraries currently have enabled, are male, female, and NA. This list of selections can be edited, so it is something that we can add or remove or edit. Now, libraries have the option of suppressing this field. So this field is currently visible at 22 CCS libraries. 9 libraries have opted to suppress the gender field. When this field is suppressed, that gender field is hidden for patrons who are registered to that library, but suppressing the field does not erase existing data. So if your library used to collect that field, but then you chose to suppress it, existing patrons will still have the data in that field. Looking at how many patrons have gender data in the record, I looked at both overall and recently registered patrons. So this comes from late November. There are roughly 16.3% of patrons in the CCS database have data in the gender field. However, if you're looking at only recently registered patrons, so users registered in the past 2 months, only 7.9% of users have data in the gender field. So again, this shows us the trend that libraries are kind of moving away from collecting gender data. We surveyed libraries in November on their collection and usage of gender. 2 libraries responded that they collect gender data. In terms of their usage, one library says they can use it for things like reporting as another piece of demographics and usage information. An example they gave was like looking at percentage of cardholders that are men versus women. The second library that says they collected say they do not use it. One thing to note though, even though the vast majority of CCS libraries say they don't collect gender, there are 20 libraries that say they do not collect gender data, but they do not suppress the field. However, gender data appears in an average of 7.88% of new patron records. And that ranged at individual libraries from 1% of your new patrons to 40% of your new patrons. So some reasons for this could be patrons are moved from a different CCS library service area. They had existing gender data in their record. When the patron was re-registered, maybe that gender data just was not removed. Could be that the gender question is still on your registration form, and sometimes patrons may fill that out. Third possibility is that since it's visible on the registration work form for those 20 libraries, staff may just be making an assumption as they are registering the patron. Now, looking at where this gender data is visible, gender data is visible in the patron registration work form in LEAP or the client for the libraries who have not suppressed the field. It is available in Simply Reports, and that data is accessible even if the field has been suppressed for your library. It's transmitted through the Polaris application services. So some of your like third-party vendors or applications. And then it's also available through SQL queries, which is the method like Bob uses to run his reports. It's not visible or accessible to staff if you've suppressed that field for your library. It's not searchable in the LEAP Find tool, and it's not transmitted through SIP or PAPI, which again are some, I'm blanking on the term, some connectivity standards that some of those third parties like your self-checks use. And it's not visible in the patron's PAC account either. So that was a lot of information to kind of set up our discussion. Again, my intent today is just to kind of see how, kind of get a feel for how the group, what the group feels about collecting gender information, and what questions, information, or data you might want if we were to make a recommendation on this, using this field system wide. So I know none of the people present, based on the survey, none of your libraries collect gender data. So I need to ask you to like consider CCS libraries as a whole. So I'm going to start discussion. I'm going to throw a discussion question. Feel free to take like the conversation wherever you want. Do you see any impact on services or the patron experience having the gender data?
I don't really see a heavy impact on that specific statistic. I mean, I know like our selectors here are basically looking at usage of an item being circed. So if it was a matter of getting more materials or items, we look at more the circ count of an item. But I know what a library does, I guess, in CCS, they do value that statistic. But for us, I know we didn't, and I think also in Lincolnwood, we didn't really use that field either. So yeah.
I sort of feel like it's a loaded question in the sense of just the general climate in libraries in the world right now. And I don't think I see a particularly positive impact on collecting the information. Like obviously our libraries here, as you pointed out, Mieko, aren't using it, so we're not going to see that. But when you talk about the fact that that information is in there, whether it's suppressed or not, and there's a data breach, there is a potential negative impact to that information being collected. And I think it's in here, although it might be part of the next discussion, where like we could add additional genders. Like then that feels even more fraught to me because in an effort to be more inclusive, you're also then putting private patron data out there that if obtained unexpectedly is now there. And what are you doing to your like it feels like there can only be a negative impact for very little positive impact other than maybe statistics, which like I can see the value that some libraries might have in having that information and knowing their patron population, but it worries me too much that that information could be gotten by someone you don't want to have it and impact your community or your patrons negatively.
No, I agree. I feel the same way here. I mean, obviously, this is information we don't share with anyone, but that fear of data breach, is definitely a concern. Obviously, we don't need it here at Wilmette for statistical purposes, but just knowing that it's out there and, some other party could have access to it, I only see it as a potential negative.
So I think one of the ideas is that like this discussion will kind of move to where we're going to figure out system-wide how we want to approach this field. And if we want to remove it system-wide, if we want to give libraries kind of that individual decision to use gender. In March, when we kind of revisit this topic, what information would you need? And this is, this can be patron statistics, CCS statistics, information beyond CCS, to make a recommendation about how you want to move forward with the gender field. Or would you need additional information?
For me, we don't use it and I would have no problem with it being suppressed, but it's sort of like the other thing the question I asked, do we have libraries for whom they really do want to use it? Or might we add libraries in the future to whom it's important? So that it's just a local decision. Otherwise, so that's the only information I don't know if that information's out there in terms of a library that uses this a lot.
Mhm.
Otherwise, suppressing it would be fine with us.
Any,
I was just gonna say, yeah, if there is one library that kind of adamantly does use it, maybe we should just make it a local decision, and the libraries who did want it or does want it can keep it, and then everyone else who doesn't, they can vote or they can choose to not disclose that. So
To go back though to what you were saying, Miyako, about most libraries don't collect the gender data, but like even those libraries are still adding it. I think if we were going to make a recommendation that it was decided locally, I think there should also be a strong recommendation that if your library doesn't collect that data, that you actively have it suppressed by CCS. Because, I mean, I don't know what your experiences are with your circulation staffs, but sometimes stuff does get filled out just because the field is there and they think they have to fill everything out, whether it's new staff or whatever it is. I think if you don't want to collect that, we shouldn't be collecting it. And it should be suppressed by everyone who's not collecting it, not just, I don't know, that I think that should be a more strongly recommended thing if we decide that some libraries still want it and we want to make it a local decision.
any other thoughts in general about gender field or the use of gender field?
Miko, is there a way to like put the gender field as a hidden feature for certain libraries if we choose to suppress it? Like, so in totality, the libraries who pick to suppress that field, is there a way that CCS can hide that specific field for that library so that we don't get in?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
So how that would, oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
oh no, that's all. Yeah.
So how that would work, and I think Mount Prospect, and I believe Wilmette already has this set up. Anyone who has a registered at value of your library, that field will be removed from the patron registration work form. And it will stay removed until they're registered at field. Like if they move to a different library and they switch it back, it will reappear. So we have the ability to suppress that field. We've had libraries request to suppress that field. And we are very happy to accommodate that at this time. like I mentioned during the slides, it does not remove the data from that field though. So if the patron is registered at a library that collects gender data, moves to your location where you suppress that field, even if staff can't view that information in the registration work form, it will still exist kind of in those back end tables.
But if we made a decision, well, I know if we made a decision, if we made a recommendation to suppress it for everyone and not collect that anymore, there would also potentially be a follow-up that involves removing that data from that field, so it's not there at all. But if we made it a local decision, could we still, as a library, get a report or run a report that, like, I don't want any of my patrons to have that in their field if they were registered at Mount Prospect? We could get a report on that and wipe that out if we wanted to, I'm assuming.
Correct. Correct. So there will be more to come about gender. Like I said, we will be revisiting this at our March meeting. In the meantime, if you think of anything that you, statistics, information, how does the ILS work, any of those kind of questions that may help inform decisions or discussion at the March meeting, please do not hesitate to reach out and let us know you'd be interested in that information. So I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is a related topic. It is the use of the patron title field. So the patron title field, this is an optional name-related field in the patron registration work form. Staff can select name prefixes from a predefined list. These list entries may be edited. This list, however, is configured at the system level and it's used system-wide. So there is no way for us to like scope the list or hide the list at the branch level. So looking at like how many patrons have record and title information in the record, less than 1% of patron records include title information. So over 99% do not have any title information. And on this, while roughly 1% of users have that title information, from our perspective, from staff's perspective, it probably feels like even less. I am still waiting for a response from Innovative on this, but it appears that not all patron title data is displaying in LEAP, both in the user's record and when you're searching in the find tool. So potential bug, I'm not sure. So 1% of patrons actually have data in that field, but looking at records, it's going to appear that even less have title information. So in terms of like visibility, you can see title field data in the patron registration record in the work form. So in their name fields and in their registration work form. You can get this data in Simply Reports. It does appear on notices. It's transmitted through API. So again, you may have some third-party vendors who can access this information. You are able to include it when you're searching by name in the find tool. And then again, it's available through Bob's report queries. It's not visible through SIP. So like your self-checks, that information isn't transmitted through your self-checks. It doesn't appear in the patron's online account, and it doesn't appear when you're trapping a hold or on hold wrappers. The origin of the title list options is unclear. It's possible that these values were ingested from our old ILS in Symphony back in, before we moved in 2018. As you'll see here, this list includes a lot of redundancies. So a lot of those titles like Ms., Ms., Mr., Mr. include variations with a period and without a period. There's also a handful of suffixes that are included in the title field. So things like junior, senior, the third, the fourth. And then there's a number of unknown entities that are used. So we have no clue what like the O means or the equal sign means. Don't want to call out WLK. I have no clue where that comes from, Matthew. I am sorry.
I don't know.
But there's no patrons that are assigned to those values. So again, it's likely something that was used once upon a time when we were on Symphony, and then just never got cleaned out. So again, we want to just kind of set the stage for a discussion on title, use of title field along with gender for our next meeting in March. There's a couple things we can do with this, right? We can remove all the values in the field so it's not used. We can make the list more inclusive. So with that, I'm going to open it for discussion now, just to kind of get a general sense of like, how do you feel about a title field? Does including a patron title impact service to patrons?
Well, Miyako, given that over 99% aren't using it, I would maybe lean towards removing it as opposed to building it up.
Yeah, it seems pretty outdated to me. Although at the same time, I'm going to start using Captain for myself. Actually, so, but I don't see it aiding service to our patrons at all.
No, but I could see it being a detriment, especially for female patrons, potentially, if you
Yeah.
selected the wrong one.
Yep.
Or she went from a Mrs. to a Miss and you're still sending it out as Mrs. or I don't know. There's a lot of minefields there that don't feel worthwhile.
No, it just seems outdated.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I just think it's outdated too.
And that's another consideration. As she mentioned, the Miss versus Mrs. Again, if the library decides they don't want to collect gender, or we decide system-wide we don't want to collect gender, like there's kind of another way of potentially gendering patrons. Are there any title fields that I don't know if help is the right word, but
I feel like some of the suffix ones are probably the most useful, and that would end up in the record anyway. So I don't see it as needing to be a separate field, I don't think.
and there is an existing suffix field. So not sure why these values are in the title field and not the suffix field. That would be easy enough cleanup though. So no strong feelings about the title field. No one here is going to miss it if it ends up going away. Along with, so again, just kind of wanted to introduce you to kind of the information, some context around the title. We will intend to discuss this more in March, along with gender, to form recommendation for the wider group. Again, please think if there is any information that would impact a recommendation, your decision, or any kind of, or that would help you kind of gain some more understanding or context around this. Anything else about title? We'll move on to our final topic, which is an action item. So with this, I'm intending to get a recommendation for a workflow to take to the ILL Tech Group in February. Back to our slides. So we are interested in getting a recommendation for a workflow that we can share with libraries for billing for NSIP accounts. So these are items your library has lent through Find More Illinois, and that the borrowing library never returns, loses, or damages. Right now, if material is lent through Find More Illinois and it is lost or damaged, there's no way to bill the item that's like currently built in through ShareIt. So we're considering if there should be some kind of like recommended workflow for managing these types of items on the Polaris side, and if so, what that workflow would look like. So we included 3 workflow options in the packet, but I will say we are not limited to these if you have additional workflow options that you wanted to consider. In all workflow scenarios, your item is checked out to your library's NSIP account in LEAP, and it is offsite on loan to another Find More Illinois library. So I'll just briefly walk through these workflow options. Option 1 is the most similar to how OCLC lost items are handled. So in this option, you would check the item in from your library's NSIP patron account, and you would check the item out to the ILL library record. So for example, if you have an item on loan to Byron Public Library and Byron Public Library loses that item, you would check it in from your library's NSIP patron account. You would check the item out to the Byron Public Library Polaris record. And then you would declare the item lost or damaged as appropriate from the record and apply the charge waive payment in Polaris as appropriate. So then on the Polaris side, you would see that the library either has paid for, is charged, or you waive the fee for that particular library for this particular item. The item has the appropriate lost or damaged circulation status. And then to like outside of Polaris, you would issue a manual invoice to that library. You could also use the Polaris send a bill option as you are declaring the item lost or damaged.
Miko, I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. I'm curious about the send a bill. I haven't seen that. Maybe I need to confer with Amy, who's our ILL coordinator, but I'm not sure if I've seen the send a bill option.
Let me highlight that for you. I'm just get into, I've got Training Leap open here. And let me open up a library that we can use as a sample.
I think Amy sends bills and invoices manually. But yeah, I wasn't a little confused about send a bill.
Share a screen just so I can show you. I will say, like, I think a lot of libraries prefer their internal invoicing versus what is available here. So in Polaris and Leap, if you were to manually declare something lost, there is a little way, if you are charging the user,
Okay,
to generate a bill. And depending on what the notification, or it could be an email bill, it could be a print bill, or a text bill. And if you select that option, the next time the bill notice job runs, it would then generate it in the appropriate format.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So again, I have a feeling most libraries prefer their own method or their own invoicing. So that's one option. Again, most similar to how the OCLC bills are handled. The second option has all of the action happening within the library's NCIP patron record. So here, instead of checking the item out to the library's individual Polaris record, you will just declare the item lost or damaged from your library's NCIP record, apply as a waiver payment, and then you'll issue your own invoice, the manual invoice to the library, and manage payment that way. The third option is just doing everything manual. So instead of declaring anything lost in Polaris, you'd basically just check the item in, change the status to withdrawn, and then again issue a manual invoice to the Find More library. So 3 possible workflows. One makes use of the library Polaris patron record, one does everything through the NCIP record, and one is completely manual. So wanted to see, first of all, if there were any other workflow options that you want to throw in for consideration. Thoughts on these 3 workflow options? Do you feel like you have a preference, or your ILL coordinator has a preference?
Well, Miyako, I talked to Amy. It seemed like the preference, I think, was for option 2. I think this option mimics what we do with normal patrons. I think since the NCIP is a patron record, it kind of makes sense to do it this way. Then there's a record of the transaction summary. She did say that the process will block items from being automatically checked out to the NCIP account. This one might not work unless you declare lost and then pay it off all at once, not waiting to get like a check from the borrowing library. I think this makes the transaction summary somewhat accurate. At least that was kind of my understanding. But at least here we were kind of leaning towards the option 2. All of them kind of work, but I think option 2, and then 1, and then 3 would be our preference.
So with option 2, you would know exactly, because of the transaction summary in the
Correct.
patron record, you would know exactly which items have been billed through Find More Illinois. But you would just, the workflow would need to specify paying or waiving right away so that the record isn't blocked.
Correct.
Miko, have you noticed a lot of items that from Find More that have been declared lost, damaged, or
We have not had any yet.
cool?
So this is kind of our attempt to get something in place before there's a need.
My biggest thing I would say is just letting our selectors know that the item is withdrawn. Just so if they wanted to replace a copy, they can. That would be definitely our biggest the concern that we would want to fill.
So in that case, workflow 1 or 2 would be best because the circ status would be lost or damaged. And that might be more of a flag for the selectors than if it was just kind of the general, like, withdrawn. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think I would go with 2 and then 1 and probably not 3.
I feel a little bit like Mount Prospect doesn't have a horse in this race yet, since we're not using Find More Illinois like everyone else is. My inclination was to go with 1, just because it does mimic the OCLC process that we're already using, and consistency is a great thing always in my book. But I also feel I feel like I can't say that super strongly because I don't have as much insight into the process since we're not there yet.
And I did get feedback from Cheryl on this one, and Carrie's preference is for workflow number 1, for the same reasons as Janine just said. It mimics their workflow for OCLC. So I would say I'm comfortable saying like option 3 is no one's a fan of option 3. That would not be helpful. So between option 2 or option 1, let me gather my thoughts here. So I think the biggest difference between option 2 or option 1 would give you the ability to know which library lost that item. Option 2 would allow you to see what has been lost through Find More specifically. Do you have any thoughts on like what type of knowledge or insight would be most helpful?
Is there, again, I'm asking this as someone who is not super familiar with the process. If you went with option 1, does that take away any ability to go back and see what maybe had been lost through Find More? Like, does it take away that like you're saying that the big difference between option 1 and 2 is 1 ties it back to the library, but option 2 specifically says we got this through Find More and not just through our standard interlibrary loan process? So I'm guessing the only way that the information you would keep through option 2 would be useful, I'm making a lot of assumptions here, is if like CCS was trying to make a decision about whether or not Find More Illinois was something we wanted to continue to utilize. So is that the only way we would keep that information is if we went through option 2? Or would there still be a way to have that even if you went with workflow option 1? Does that question make sense?
It makes total sense. I don't have an answer, unfortunately. I
Okay.
don't know what would be available, like what chair it would be able to give us, if it would be able to give us anything. I'm just making a note here. So quick straw poll. How many committee members would be have a preference for workflow 2 at this time?
I do. Wilmette.
Like,
I'm still kind of indifferent, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But if the majority is with 2, I would not mind doing 2. I think they both get that damaged field for my item is what I'm more concerned about, so.
And then Mount Prospect would, or 1.
Think so, but
And that's okay.
I feel like I
No,
could
Carrie's-
say either way because we probably don't have enough information to strongly say 1 versus 2.
So I think this is how I want to, I think this is how I wanted to kind of do this workflow. I know in the past we have set like, this is a recommended workflow. Here's like the effect if you use this workflow. Here are other workflows you can use and the effect, right? So it's not something where it's like libraries have to use this workflow. So one thing I just want to verify with our with the CCS staff who work with Find More Illinois is if there would be any consequences if the library chooses like which workflow to use. So I think instead of making an action today for a recommended workflow, I want to check on that first. And I also want to check, you know, if the library does option 1 and uses the library's Polaris account, do we lose any like find more information?
yeah. That's a good-
So yeah. So let me check. So again, we'll pause on making a motion for a recommended workflow. We can get that information for you and we'll follow up through email. And if this is a situation where where libraries can choose between like workflow 1, workflow 2, depending on local needs. Like, I guess would the group be comfortable with that? Just saying like, here are your options, like choose which one.
I'd be comfortable with it.
Okay. I'm going to find that information out, and I will follow up with the group through email. Anything else on those NSIP billing? In that case, we are at the end of our agenda. I want to give everyone just an opportunity if there was anything that has come to mind about any of our agenda topics before we conclude the meeting today. Just give a moment if you want to share anything else. In that case, I'm going to upload the recording to YouTube, so we will have access to that. I will share the recording through an email. I will be following up on the NSIP billing pending questions that we have. If you or your libraries think of anything you would want to help the March discussion and decision about gender fields or title fields, send that to me, please. I think those were the follow-up. I think those were the follow-up that we had from this meeting. So our next meeting will be scheduled for March 7th, 2025. I will update the calendar online. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Danny, second?
Second.
Janine, all in favor?
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone? Okay. This meeting is adjourned right at 11 a.m. Let me stop recording.